Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pink My Little Confessions and happy holidays. I know this is a really, really fun time for everyone. So I hope everyone's really spending time with their families and enjoying every minute of the time off or at least downtime that you may or may not have. So thank you for joining me today. As you know who I am, I'm attorney Stephanie Garces, owner of Garces Law Firm, where we help parents prepare for the unexpected. And today's episode, we are discussing a very interesting topic, one that maybe some of you have already experienced or have parents or know of parents that have been going through a divorce after 50. Now, we named this the way we did is because we want to know what happens. What happens at this point when you are in the later part of your life and perhaps divorce becomes something that is unexpected. And it happens every so often to individuals that are married for many years and really just parents that have children. Maybe you stayed together for the majority of your life, but maybe there is a reason why now divorce is an option. So nothing wrong with that. But, I want to just say, as children, and I can say this because I am a child of parents that have like every other parent just have things that they are concerned about, and us as children are always in the caught in the middle. So I can say as children we want to believe that our parents are always going to stay together, they're going to stay married without any issues forever and ever. But however, as you know, sometimes things happen and people want a change in their lives. Something happens where maybe they've been together for so many years and now they're like, it's probably better if we part ways. So life changes, things happen, and it's really no one's fault. They just happen. So in this episode, we're going to be covering why this is important to discuss. What are things that your parents or people that are parents should consider, especially when they separate or divorce legally. And their estate planning needs are certainly going to be changing and really need to be addressed because just as the divorce is bound to happen for some of us, and we get there and we think, okay, that's off the list, we're done with the divorce, the estate planning that you have or don't have in place is something that needs to be addressed. So we're going to talk about that today for all the viewers that are just joining us. As I mentioned, I'm attorney Stephanie Garces, owner of Garces Law Firm, Arlington Heights, Illinois, where we prepare for the unexpected for you and your families. Especially today, we're talking about parents that get divorced after 50 or parents that get divorced later in life. However you want to spin that. But really, that's a topic we're covering today. And, as adult children, we tend to have a little more life experience, right? So as we become older, it's hard for us to imagine our parents separating, having to go to different homes, maybe for the holidays, like now, maybe having to explain to the children that grandma and grandpa are no longer together. And so there's a lot of changes that happen when divorce happens. And as adult children, you're faced with having to sort of maneuver that and explain, to your family what's going on. But the concern is always your parents. You want them to be taken care of, especially for you. You are the legacy. So if you're watching this and your parents are the topic we're discussing today, this is relevant to you as well, not just the parents watching. So you'd be surprised, how often this happens. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about divorce, how this is something that people don't plan for, especially life has a weird way of taking left turns on us. So some of the things we want to cover today is just how complicated this can be. Children, when they're minors, that's still important for them to be part of this conversation. And really, the estate planning is still a need, even if your children aren't adult children. So instead of like custody battles that you face and guardianship, which could be like a minor child issue in a divorce, the concern shifts for adult children with finances, retirement, previously established accounts or financial plans that were put in place. Some individuals already have an estate plan. It's already been taken care of many moons ago, but perhaps that was before the divorce took place. So those are key areas that we have to consider and really for the future of your family. So when work has been done to plan for a future together, now we have to undo it and we need to reassess it. So the good news about any of this and the biggest takeaway is that you can actually update and modify your estate plan whenever you want. So that is something, when I say whatever you want, I'm actually really saying you can do it, but you have to be of sound mind. There's a lot of requiremements, but assuming that you know what you're doing and you're healthy, yes, you can modify your documents. So we're going to be discussing that. We're going to be discussing how to refamiliarize yourself with your existing estate plan. You may need to dust that estate plan off to make sure that it's actually something that you want and it reflects what your current life is like. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients that have their will or their trust that was created, 20 years ago when their children were young. And now they have adult children and haven't updated that. So that is really important. If that resonates with you, make sure that you refamiliarize yourself with that. I wanted to kind of discuss also the terms that are thrown around in estate planning. So wills, powers of attorney, trust. What is the difference? Why is one more important than the other? Especially when you have trust that you created with your spouse. Those are really important as well, because those have two individuals that created that at the time, and perhaps you may or may no longer be with your significant other. So those are things we'll discuss today. We're also going to talk a lot about life insurance. Life insurance is important, and I want to make sure everyone understands how it works. So we'll touch about that. That's a topic that we touch on actually every so often. And I always say, depending on who you got your life insurance with, or if you have it or if you don't have it, feel free to contact me. I know many people that can do this work for you. Really important, and also something that we always have to refamiliarize yourself with when a divorce happens, when a change happens, especially because those policies are ones that you have to have someone named as a beneficiary. So we'll talk about that and how that can be used as an important tool for estate planning. And also the trusts. We talk about trusts a lot. We'll talk a little bit about how those are used in other ways, especially when you have a trust that you created, and maybe there's some funds that are used for that, or maybe one of the spouses uses the funds as income. Those are things that really matter in a divorce. Now, a divorce attorney can tell you really the nuances of what is the law when it comes to that, but we certainly are familiarized ourselves with these laws that are ever changing because they're relevant, because this is the type of things that pop up after a divorce or during a divorce when someone's reassessing their trust or their estate plan, making sure that it actually reflects who they want their things to go to and their assets to be distributed, especially if the ex-spouse is no longer in the picture. So another thing we're going to talk about is when to notify your estate planning attorney. Or perhaps when do you pick up the phone to call one? When is a good time to do that? Those are things we're going to talk about. So if you're thinking about getting divorced or in a divorce, your estate planning attorney should be one of the first calls that you make outside of your divorce attorney. And the reason is because in Illinois, at least, there are different types of assets. There are marital assets, and then there's non-marital assets. And these assets are may or may not be contributing to the divorce, but they're certainly relevant when we do these types of assessments. So something to consider is making that phone call to make sure we offer free consultations so that you can be sure that your estate plan is going to be updated and modified, again, to include or not include certain things that perhaps are now relevant that weren't relevant 20 years ago. So just keeping your estate planning attorney in the loop is always, always a good idea. And it really ensures that you're protected, that your legacy is protected, and everything that you worked really, really hard for goes in the direction that you want it if something happens to you. And so, like I said, that's always unexpected, but you certainly have control of these sort of things now. So make sure that you keep your estate planning attorney in the loop. It's always, always a good idea. Now, one other thing too is financial documents. We'll talk a little bit about that, financial documents and powers of attorney. I know we say a lot on this show, but these documents are important, also need to be updated. So it's not just about your will. It's not just about your trust. It's also about some of the other documents you may have in place. Powers of attorney are a great example of that. That authorizes someone to give power to do certain things, perhaps make your medical decisions, or perhaps have access to your financial institution. Those are important documents you also want to dust off and check, especially if you're going through a divorce or maybe considering it. Always a good time to do that. And again, consultations with us are free. Now, when I want to recap really quick is there's a lot to cover, but we're going to kind of go in the direction of focusing today's discussion on life after divorce, especially after 50, after your midlife. And what do you do? How do you handle that? How do you protect your finances? Or if you're the child of someone that is facing divorce or thinking about going through it, you also have a lot to learn from this show to make sure that you are protected, your parents are protected, and that everyone goes home happy, especially by planning ahead. And that's really what my job is. So what happens when older parents get divorced? Well, in general, there's a lot. So one of the first things we want to discuss is what is the most frequently asked questions, I guess you could say, in this arena. So I kind of wanted to take those one by one. One of the audience members asked me about this particular topic, and they said, is it possible to change the allocation of funds from my ex to my new spouse immediately? And this is a wonderful question because the answer is not always clear cut. And I say that because many people will think, okay, I want to get divorced like yesterday, but I haven't followed the process. I don't even know where to start. I'm just sick of this marriage. I want out. So when that happens, there's certainly ways that you can modify your estate plan, but keep in mind that Illinois law is very strict in that, people have rights. Your spouse doesn't have less rights if you try to disinherit them. However, you can still disinherit your spouse. That is not against the law, so to speak, but it's something that is a timing thing. So you may consider speaking with your divorce attorney or your estate planning attorney and think about the timing. So in a scenario where you are going through a divorce and perhaps it's been sort of finalized, or you have a divorce decree, which is kind of like, getting the process going, it's almost pretty much finalized. That is a good time to actually go ahead and modify your estate plan documents to remove your ex-spouse and to put whoever else you want in it. And the reason I say that's good timing is because when you think about formalities to actually divorce someone formally and to get a divorce decree, that is kind of a more clear-cut version of going through and sort of divorcing that person so that they're no longer in the picture, and all the financial or marital assets or non-marital assets that you had between your marriage has already been addressed. So it's a lot easier for you to put together your estate plan to modify this so that you can actually remove them as a beneficiary or the person that's going to benefit from your trust. And then you can put in whoever you want to distribute your assets or to be the beneficiary of your assets. And so the timing is really important, but nonetheless, it's still worth doing. Even if you say, I'm thinking about it and you still want to explore, there's no reason not to. It's always recommended to try to formalize your divorce and modify your documents, because that is really the best way to protect yourself so that there isn't any gray area at that point. So that's a great question. Another question that the audience members have asked before on this topic is, do I have to notify my ex if I remove them from my will? Again, your will, if you have your own will and you've created this many moons ago, or perhaps, you're creating one for the first time, you don't have to notify anyone truly of your updates. It's a private document. As attorneys and clients, we have what's called attorney-client privilege. So if you tell me something about your will and you want to modify it for whatever reason, we have a conversation about that, and I can't go out of my way to notify your spouse and anyone else, your neighbor, your kids. Now, of course, if you want to notify them, you certainly can, but that is up to you. Now, I wouldn't highly recommend it, because why do you want to create more problems and poke the bear? But keep in mind that if you are going through a divorce currently, your will and maybe some of the modifications you may have made, that can be what's called renounced. So that means that your spouse can come back and say, hey, I'm supposed to be getting 50% of her estate. I'm supposed to be getting this. And that really becomes an issue if for example, you were to pass away, for example, during the divorce, or perhaps there's an issue with the will that becomes relevant at the time. So the circumstances have to sort of align. But without going into the weeds, do you have to notify your ex? No, you don't really have to notify them, but you do want to consult with an attorney to make sure when to make those modifications, how to make those modifications. Many people are unaware of the requirements of making modifications. Many of us think, oh, it's just, you cross it out and you initial, or perhaps you've seen other suggestions. I mean, I've seen a lot of different ways of modifying, but there are legal ramifications for doing it incorrectly and modifying your will incorrectly. So if you're modifying anything and you're hoping to remove someone, you don't have to notify them, but you certainly want to make sure it's done properly, and you want to make sure you get a consultation to make sure if this is the right time and if it's a good fit for what we're trying to accomplish. So that's just something to keep in mind. Another question that we get very often, and one that I really enjoy answering, is how can I transfer the ownership of life insurance policies, and do I have to do that before I finalize my divorce? Now, life insurance policies are a very important topic. As a general rule, life insurance policies, as long as you have named a beneficiary, you've named someone to have the benefit of that policy, that life insurance is covered. It's not going to be part of the estate. You can update your life insurance whenever you choose. And I actually suggest, if you were thinking this is something that is applicable to you, or you've even maybe just had a policy for many years and you don't really know who it's with, take the time to actually look into this, because I can't tell you how many times people will say, yes, I have life insurance, but they're not necessarily sure of the benefit of that life insurance, as in the amount, what kind of policy it is sometimes, who is actually benefiting from this. So you certainly want to make sure you know about the policy and who is your beneficiary. So, to transfer ownership of insurance policies, you really just have to check to see who's going to benefit from this on paper, who is in the beneficiary form on this policy. To transfer that, to change that, you can do that on your own. You just call the company that does the life insurance, or is actually you're paying every month. You would know who this is by looking at your statement every month, because sometimes there's a policy that you're paying per month, right? So that's the best way to sort of dismantle this thing, because sometimes people are so overwhelmed by the idea of life insurance, and quite frankly, it's not the most exciting topic. But it's really important, because you have to make sure that you know the ins and the outs of it. So having a divorce that's happening, you may have your spouse as the beneficiary of your life insurance. And I would imagine if you're divorcing your spouse, you may or may not want them as the beneficiary. I mean, I don't want to assume, but for the most part, generally, you wouldn't want someone to have the benefit of a big or small life insurance policy if they're your ex-spouse. So you may consider looking into this and transferring this, immediately, and making sure that you, of course, consult with your attorney, your estate planning attorney, and your divorce attorney to make sure that what you're doing is proper. And you want to make sure you move quickly, because a lot of times people will procrastinate. We talk about procrastination a lot on Pink Mike, and I always tell people you want to make sure you're actually doing your part, taking the time to contact the company, get the policy, read it, make sure you know the amount, what it covers, and who is the beneficiary. Sometimes you can even put, someone as a secondary. If the first person isn't living, who is a secondary? The contingent beneficiary. So some policies have that as well. Make sure you ask your life insurance company and or representative. They would be able to know. So that is a really, really good question. And life insurance really should be a part of everyone's estate plan, if at all possible. Try. Now, the other thing that I get a question about is, how soon can I add my new spouse's children as beneficiaries? Well, similar to what I said before, depending on the timing of where everything is with your divorce, whether it's been finalized or not, it's still a good discussion to have with your estate planning attorney. about this. So everyone's family dynamic is different. We talk a lot about families in this show. We have people that have different types of families. Maybe you know, you have children or you don't have children, or perhaps there's mixed families where you've married into a family and your spouse had children, but you don't. So if this is something that you're concerned about, you can always change your beneficiaries in your estate plan. And I already talked about life insurance policies. It's same with retirement accounts and all of that. You can always change those. But when it comes to estate planning documents, you can certainly do it, but the timing is tricky. You want to make sure that you consult with your attorney. And we talk about where you're at in your divorce. Have you filed for divorce? And if you haven't, what your options are. Now, sometimes people will say, well, I don't want to get divorced just yet. I want to get divorced later. Well, you have to be conscious of this as well, but sometimes later never comes. I always talk about this on the show because when you're modifying things and you're wanting things to go in a certain way, you do have to know Illinois law does explain that if you are married and certain things are part of the marriage, or they're called marital assets, it's very likely that your spouse, even if you are still with them and haven't divorced them, they may still have a right to some of the things that you have. So whether or not it's part of the marriage or a marital asset is something your divorce attorney is going to fight over for you. But as a matter of fact, you can always modify your estate plan, but you do have to be considerate of the timing of a divorce. And really, have you filed? Those things all matter. So it's hard to give a general answer on this because everyone's scenario is different, but it's still worth discussing. And you can certainly change your beneficiaries, especially if we're talking about your new spouse's children. If you want to add them, you can certainly do that. And I would even go as far as saying if you have a new spouse, you may consider doing a joint trust. Sometimes a joint trust is an option where two people that are married, newly married, now create a joint trust. So basically that trust would distribute the assets according to their wishes. And you can put who's in charge of doing that and who the beneficiaries actually are. So you could certainly do that. There's also options to do separate trusts. You can still have a new spouse, and some people will consider doing their own trust. And that could be for personal reasons, for liability purposes. And there's a lot that goes into an estate plan, whether or not you do one together or separate. It really depends on your assets. It really depends on your circumstances and situation. But nonetheless, there are options for you for adding your new spouse's children as beneficiaries. One of the questions that get often, and we love talking about this, is do we offer virtual appointments? Absolutely. We offer virtual appointments all the time because I think this is not going away. The world now is used to being on camera with their professionals, whoever it is. I've even heard of physicians being on camera and doing exams and whatnot. Not much different than what we do. We do consultations, but actually an exam. I mean, can you imagine? That is the world we live in. So we do offer free consultations, virtually or in person, if you are comfortable doing that. And they're free. We do 30-minute consultations in Spanish and in English. So we can certainly translate for your parents or your loved ones or yourself if you're looking for that. Hablamos español. So I always want to make sure everyone knows that because there is a lot of individuals who may need this estate plan, but they don't really know where to turn, whether that's because they don't know where to go or there's a language barrier. So feel free to contact us for those consultations to make sure that there's different options out there. Virtual or in person is always a thing. Another topic that I said I was going to cover, and I kind of wanted to go back to it really quick, is when we talk about, your exes and your spouses and all of this, you certainly want to also think about the will if you have minor children. So sometimes people will have a will in place and they have each other, like, mom and dad have each other as the guardians. Yes, parents have rights to having and raising their own children, but something to keep in mind, even if things don't pan out with your significant other, is getting a will updated to make sure that the guardians that you've chosen or already have chosen previously are people that you still want to raise your children if you happen to have minor children and are getting a divorce. And the reason I bring that up is because, as we know, when we're initially married, you marry into the family. That's what they say. You get married, you marry the family. if you have a will that you haven't looked at in a while and you're getting divorced and you have minor children, you may consider looking at that and updating that as well. Those are equally as important, because even though the topic is getting divorced as, later in life, well, there's many of you that may be getting divorced earlier in life. And so I wanted to point this out as well, because having a will that you've put in place or haven't put in place and getting a divorce, very, very important to look at that, to revise it, to refamiliarize yourself with what you put in that initially, because you wouldn't want to put, your ex-brother-in-law if in fact maybe he's not someone that you would want to raise your child. So that's just something to keep in mind. So make sure you look at that. It's something that many of us do not think about until later. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And another thing too, I talked a little bit about when I started the show about trusts and how they're used to transfer assets to heirs. So keep in mind that a will and the trusts are estate planning documents. We use them a lot and we use them interchangeably, but they're very different. So when we talk about trusts on this show, a trust has a lot more value, at least according to the law. It has a lot more value than a will. That doesn't mean the will isn't necessary and important. It just doesn't transfer and protect certain assets that a will would. For example, a home. A home is a great example. If you own your property where you currently live, you may consider a living trust and really using that as an option for your estate planning tool to make sure that that property is transferred to whoever you want it to be transferred to, whether that is your ex-spouse or not. Really depends on your situation. But that's just something to think about when we talk about divorce and properties. Many people say, yeah, I got divorced and now I have a condo that I bought and I'm living my best life. That's great. You certainly want to do that. But keep in mind what I just said. If you're looking at your estate plan, you've modified everything, please consider looking at your home, if you own one, as another asset to protect. And that is something that I consult many clients on, is let's make sure we have the proper estate plan so that that home is transferred to the heirs that you want upon your death, or if something happens and you become incapacitated or something to that effect, we can still protect the house. So trusts are a lot more than just, what we discuss is, a lot of it has to do with your assets, and we talk about beneficiaries, but real estate too, and passing things on to your heirs that necessarily a will wouldn't do, is another reason to have a trust. So just keep that in mind. For those of you that are watching, I just want to make sure I use my platform to educate everyone to know that the trusts and the wills are equally as important, but some of them have more weight according to the law than others, especially when we're talking about divorce. So how do you contact me? As always, if you have any questions about anything that we've discussed today, feel free to call or text us at the number you're going to see below. Anytime, we are always answering calls and questions about clients that have a number of questions to ask. Consultations are free. Spanish and English is available. So make sure you guys take advantage of this. And as always, I love hearing your feedback and I really appreciate everybody watching. So I just want to make sure the viewers know that I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. And I really want to thank all of you, now that we're at the end of the year, that I can't thank you all enough for all the support that you've given throughout my Pink Mike Leo Confessions. This show has allowed me to connect with more people than I deserve. So I really appreciate that. And I'm always welcoming feedback, and feel free to share and watch this on YouTube, on my Facebook page, to make sure you're educated and that your family is protected, because that really is my job, securing your legacy. And I want you to be able to be educated in the process. So feel free to reach out if I can help you with that journey. And as always, we do always meet here Tuesdays at 1:00. So you can always check in later, like I said, to watch the videos, but just make sure you don't wait. Don't wait to reach out to your family, your children, especially if you're facing divorce issues. Reach out to a divorce attorney. We definitely know many. If you're looking for someone that can do that, reach out to us for estate planning needs. We are happy to help. So I invite you here to meet me again next week at 1:00 at Pink Mike Leo Confessions, where we're going to cover another topic in the new year. But in the meantime, Make sure you guys stay safe, shares with your fellow parents, your family, and as always, have a wonderful new year. And thank you again. Until we meet again.